Before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsors, the Astra Foundation, Barr Foundation, Terry and Bradley Bloom Foundation, Endowment for Health, Fidelity Charitable Catalyst Fund, Eastern Bank, Patriots Foundation, Greater Cincinnati Foundation, TJX, and most of all, I would like to thank Liberty Mutual for their grant that supported this program, and also W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Thank you so much for making this program possible. Welcome to the Couch Conversation. I am Bethia Carter of Give Black Alliance. This year, we're focusing on Black to the Past. There are so many things happening around us, yet we are choosing to focus on the assets in our community. We are excited to welcome a very bright star in our community, Leah Thomas, an environmentalist activist, author, and a founder of Intersectional Environmentalist. Our program tonight, Plantation to Pollution, will explore the powerful connection between Black Americans and the environment. Environmental justice is not just about climate change or conservation, it's about people and the people who have been impacted by a toxic legacy that started with slavery that destroyed fragile ecosystems, draining swamps, clearing forests to plant crops, fueling steamships, and introducing devastating invasive species. Starting in the 1840s, pesticides and fertilizers were introduced with not so much of an afterthought given to the impact on the lives of people that were picking cotton or on the land. Soil exhaustion, erosion, water pollution gave way to harsher conditions as factory waste created exposure to environmental hazards, water contamination, and air pollution. And all along, our communities have long borne the brunt of this harm, including the placement of polluting industries in historically Black areas. Tonight, we are not only shining a light on these challenges, but offering a celebration of the strength, resiliency, and impact of Black Americans in the environmental justice movement. We will explore the history and uplift community voices and highlight how philanthropy and activism can move policy, and more importantly, move us to a more just, sustainable future for all. Together with Give Black Alliance, we will explore how environmental justice not only impact our lives, but what is the role of philanthropy and policy and the ways we can collectively work together to create a more green future. With that, we are delighted to welcome Leah Thomas. Leah is a celebrated environmentalist based in Los Angeles, coining the term eco-communicator to describe her style of environmental activism. Leah uses her passion for writing and creativity to explore and advocate for the critical yet often overlooked relationship between social justice and environmentalism. Leah founded and launched the nonprofit Intersectional Environmentalist, a platform and resource hub that aims to advocate for environmental justice, provides educational resources surrounding intersectional environmentalism, and promote inclusion and accessibility. We are delighted to have her talk about her work, innovative programs that she has created, and the work in the field. With that, I welcome Leah Thomas. Thank you for joining us. So, to get tonight started, I would like to start with a simple question. What does it mean to be an environmentalist?
It's like we don't have to summit a mountain to be an environmentalist. You can sit on your porch, you can tend to your garden, you can remember the histories of all of the Black environmentalists. And that's a great place to start. And then other than that, I would say my one assignment, if I'm able to give one in addition to reading the book, would
Please
be
do.
to find your local environmental justice organization, like see who they are. It might be a community garden. It could be people that are fighting, air pollution. It could be as simple as a community fridge, which is something that we have in Los Angeles where people just stock up a fridge for anybody who needs food. Finding your local environmental justice organization, knowing them, donating if you can. But honestly, just I think getting educated is the first step. And I don't want environmental justice to be something that's so overwhelming. So again, kind of getting lost in the beautiful Black environmental history. And one more thing is there's a book that's called Black Nature, if anybody has read it, by
Black nature.
Black Nature by a wonderful author named Camille, I think Dungley.
Mhm.
And it's an anthology of poems over 100 plus years of African Americans. And a lot of our art is always considered, like civil rights or racial justice art. Okay, yes, but it's also her argument is our work is also environmental art at the same time because we're talking about the natural environment and the world around us, and we deserve to be remembered as environmentalists as well. So check out that anthology of poetry. It's one of my favorites, and you will walk into any room knowing that you are, in fact, an environmentalist just by being Black, honestly.
I love that. That is so uplifting. It is just wonderful to have you here with us. And, as I think about, to your point, something that all of us can do, I kind of makes me think about power sharing. And what does it mean? Like, we've heard so many negative things, right? Whether it were the executive orders and we're hearing devastating news all around us. And here we are, we can look at books, we can do more. But I kind of have another question. So when I think about power sharing, I kind of think of the young lives that I know, whether it's my 12-year-old daughter or whether it's the other kids around her. What do you recommend for like young people to do as well?
Well, it depends. I mean, I was a bit of a nature nerd, so I loved
I like
running
that.
around outside, but I would say every kid, like being able to learn how to get your hands in soil, learning how to, tend to a garden, even if it's not, forever, even one day, gardening or going outside, or again, if there's a community garden, extra brownie points if it's a Black-led community garden, taking them there, getting to know environmental leaders, etc. I think really just helping to cultivate a relationship with the natural world will inspire kind of this environmental advocacy in the youth because they'll see, I want a lot of kids. So over the last decade or so, there was, Fridays for Future, if people are familiar, there were high schoolers that were leaving school on Friday to protest because of the climate crisis. And that was an example of so many kids coming to environmental advocacy out of fear because they were so scared that they weren't going to have a future anymore. And I want to bring this next generation of kids to environmentalism through a love of nature because I don't want them to be so scared that they have to leave school because they think we won't have a planet. I want to remind kids of this beautiful planet that's worth protecting and all of the incredible heroes at, community organizations so they can come to this space from a place of love and appreciation. So I think that's the best thing we can do to instill that message of environmentalism in the youth.
I think another book is coming. And I really do. I really think you should write that because I think Greta, like the Greta movement, brought that kind of energy, right? That, oh my God, we're not going to be here. We've got to do something. And I know that my child is influenced by that. But I think what you just said, hey, let's take a deep breath, a collective deep breath, a Black deep breath,
Yeah.
really think through. We've been here a while. How do we love more and how do we love better and love Earth better? I just think that is amazing. Leah, I think that's another book for you. I really do.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
have one comment from the audience. Thinking about the environment and the work of Dr. Robert Bullard, and the work that you're doing is amazing and directly linked to Black and Brown civil rights movement. How do we enable folks to consider connecting deeply with our Indigenous relatives? Um, I know you spoke a little bit about that earlier. This question asks, the medicine wheel speaks directly to how we heal our communities and Mother Earth. How do we talk about that or really think through what does that mean in our culture?
Absolutely. I think as a two-parter, so one, Black and Indigenous liberation, I think go hand in hand. Being stolen people on stolen land is a very complicated existence. But we've been here for a very, very long time in this country. And again, very complicated relationship with this country, and that has caused tensions in the past, even sometimes with like Black and Indigenous relations and community building, because again, if you are a part of the diaspora and, former enslavement in this country, this land is almost all many of us as Black Americans know. However, it isn't our traditional homelands, and this land was, stolen from Indigenous people. So I think Black and Indigenous liberation and us working together is very, very important. There's actually an organization called Black and Indigenous Liberation, which I think is really amazing. In addition to that, I do want to also remind folks of so many Black, Indigenous land stewardship practices that we can also be very inspired by. So for example, conservation in Kenya, like there are so many incredible Black folks that know how to take care of the land. And then these like tourist industries come in and tell them that they don't. But there's so much Black ancestral knowledge when it comes to cultivating the land, and like Black Indigenous knowledge that can be applied to the way that we take care and cultivate the land. So I guess that's a two-parter, like making sure that we do our due diligence to understand that, while we uplift the Black community, we lose nothing while also uplifting the Indigenous community and working together. We can learn, I don't know if anyone's seen Sinners, the movie. I don't want to give a spoiler. Have you seen it?
No, I have not,
Okay.
but
Okay. Well,
so
we
it's
could,
centers,
I
right?
won't, I
We're
won't
cut out.
I won't spoil anything, but for those who have seen it, I think we could have learned a lot from our Indigenous brothers and sisters if we listened to what they said in the beginning of the movie. I wish I could see you all if anyone's seen it. I don't know if you can drop a comment, but we can learn a lot from each other, and I think information sharing is really important as well.
But I also think what you just gave me, even when we wrote our report about, we create Giving Black reports, and we wrote a report about Hampton Roads. And to your point, when our foreparents came over who were enslaved, they helped cultivate the land in a way to teach others how to not only grow crops in certain ways that made it beneficial for all, but also how to captivate the wind and all these environmental things and offerings that they gave that you're right, is just swept under the table of history and not really thinking through the fact that we brought our environmental lessons with us. Thank you
Okay.
for reminding us. Another question that came in, when I first learned about environmental justice, when there were plans to build a power plant in my community, we were successful in preventing its construction. Are power plants still being processed or proposed as a viable alternative source of energy? If so, are communities successful in their oppositions? I think that is a very interesting question in the sense that power plants were talked about a great deal before, not so much anymore. What's happening in that area?
So I would say a new conversation that's emerged is about nuclear energy.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because it is gaining some bipartisan support. As kind of a environmental hippie through and through, I'm always really skeptical about nuclear energy, but there are a lot of people who are strong proponents of nuclear energy. Um, but my biggest concern is we'll see similar things when it comes to power plants or, where oil facilities are placed, et cetera. I have a hunch that those nuclear plants are going to be nowhere near Orange County, and they are probably going to be near Black and Brown communities. So I would say that's a big environmental justice issue that we need to be on the lookout for, because nuclear energy is really where people want to go, and it has the most bipartisan support. So a lot of conservatives are really passionate about nuclear energy and consider it to be a green energy. And there are a lot of people on the left that are also coming to nuclear energy because they feel like it's one of the most inexpensive, and the energy output is pretty significant of nuclear that could power, the next generation in the future. I don't love it. And I have some environmental justice concerns, but it seems like nuclear might be the future that we're headed in, unfortunately.
Share your concerns, educate us, because I think the more we can learn here, the more we empower ourselves. And thinking through to something you just mentioned in passing, zoning, right? If we don't know, we're not asking the right questions. So please share your thoughts.
My biggest concerns would be the disposal of nuclear waste and where it's going to go. Again, we saw a lot of toxic waste disposal. Someone mentioned Dr. Robert Bullard. People consider him to be like the father of environmental justice. There's also a woman named Hazel M. Johnson of Chicago that's considered the mother of environmental justice. And a lot of their work was about saying how Black communities are in what's called a toxic donut. So they're basically surrounded by toxic waste sites, highways, pollution, landfills, not all, but they found a lot of toxic donuts around the country that, no surprise, are mostly Black communities, regardless of wealth, which was also very shocking. So in Chicago in particular, they were looking at a more middle class Black community that still had more toxic waste, landfills, highways, air pollution, etc. So when it comes to nuclear waste, I just need to know, where is it going to go? Because usually it's buried deep in the soil or sometimes in the ocean, etc. But if it's being buried, I would love to know where it's being buried, because if we continue historic trends, it's probably going to be in Black and Brown communities. So I think waste disposal is my biggest thing. And then I think I'm just, I could get more educated, but as like a hippie, I don't like nuclear and weapons and all of that.
You keep dropping these little things in passing that I think is, I know that I think is fascinating. Regardless of wealth, I think too often when we think of these devastating sites, we think of poverty, right? We think of poor people. I want to go back to that point, regardless of wealth. Did they see these donuts in middle class Black communities? And if so, what was being done? Did they know? Were people, how would I say, were they abreast of what's happening? Were they equipped to even talk about it?
Yeah, and I think the regardless of wealth one is important as well, especially in conversations with like non-Black folks, because sometimes they'll say, oh, this isn't environmental racism.
It's
It's
great.
just it's just an economic issue. It's just poverty. I'm like, no, it's intersectional. It's actually both. Because again, when you look at middle class Black communities, and impoverished Black communities, like we're still seeing environmental justice concerns. And I had mentioned this to you on our prep call,
That's right.
but a statistic from a couple of years ago, directly from the EPA, 70%, or it was actually 71% of Black Americans live in a county that frequently violates federal air quality standards. So that's the majority of Black people in this country are living in a county that is frequently violating federal air quality standards. So again, regardless of income, Black folks were still being exposed to environmental hazards at a higher rate. And that's why the work of Hazel M. Johnson and Dr. Robert Bullard was so important. Hazel, again, her background, the church is going to make an appearance again in this story, but was just a concerned citizen with no sustainability or environmental background. But she was noticing so many people were getting cancer in her
Mm,
community in Chicago, which was a middle class community in Chicago. So many people were having cancer or unexplainable illnesses that they were experiencing. And that's when she coined the term toxic donut, where she realized, okay, I'm looking at formerly redlined communities, and it seems like here's where all the toxic waste is, or they're building more highways in our communities, etc. So it's it's a product of housing discrimination, I would say, and racism and so many systemic issues. But I think it is important for us to understand that this is impacting all of us, regardless of income.
Another point that I just caught that you mentioned, these federal laws were in place, yet the states weren't following it. Am I correct? So if you, and if I quote you correctly, 71% of predominantly Black counties were not following the federal air quality mandate. So if they weren't following that, I have to go back to now that it is dismantled, what's going to happen at the state level? Or what do you think may happen?
I mean, I don't want to be bleak, but I do feel like that would give more reason to ignore it, especially if there's no, there's state environmental legislation and also, federal policies. But like even looking at Flint, Michigan and the lead that they had in their water, like there are more Flint, Michigans out there that we don't know and don't make national news. There are a lot of communities that have higher levels of lead in their water. Even in California, for example, last year, California had to send out a letter to people to let them know if there happened to be a little bit more lead than the, state's regulatory policy on lead levels. So many people missed that letter or they didn't open the letter. I mean, you get this random letter in the mail from a random environmental agency that's like, by the way, there might be lead in your water. And unless a ton of people read that letter and get together and rise up, they're just going to ignore it. So it really is going to take people power and us really getting hip and understanding what's going on and asking those questions. Like even in the city that I live in, California, I didn't think my lead levels were going to be high, but I looked at it and it is slightly higher than it's supposed to be. So I don't want anyone to be alarmist or scared, but I know that knowledge is power. And I think it could be a great opportunity for us to understand what's going on because I think a lot of people just don't know. And especially when it comes to air pollution, respiratory illnesses, and asthma, I feel like the healthcare system sometimes blames Black folks. They'll just say, well, asthma is really common in the Black community, but they won't talk about the fact that, okay, most Black folks in this country are breathing in polluted air on the regular, and that is leading to or exacerbating respiratory illnesses and asthma, et cetera. And that's why we're seeing, more, bleak outcomes in the Black community. So I think we have to tie so many things back to environmentalism and get as knowledgeable as we can about what we're eating, what we're drinking, and what's going on in our environment.
It's almost like you're saying this is a root cause, no pun intended, but is a root cause. So as I'm thinking about this as a root cause, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but this is what's coming to me. Zoning, right? We have some political power within our local hands. Like, what should people think about when they're addressing their counselor or their state rep? How can we incorporate our language or become smart, really, about environmental justice and raising that flag in either zoning or to our state reps or to the people who supposedly represent us? We've done it in other issues. Give us some language. What should we ask for?
I would definitely say try your hardest, and I'll try to send out a list, but there's an environmental justice organization or even activist or organizer in your community that has probably been trying to fight this uphill battle and really needs resources, amplification, and support, people power. So even signing a petition is kind of like supporting the work that they're doing specifically and kind of taking their lead. Instead of recreating anything, because it actually makes me feel more optimistic. Because once I come across an environmental justice issue, sometimes I get really overwhelmed and I just feel like, oh my God, there's nothing I can do. And I just go down this anxiety spiral. But when I look up, say I live in Highland Park in California, and I look up Highland Park environmental justice issues and Highland Park environmental justice org. I'll find the issue, but then I'll find the org and I'll find the person who's been going to the courthouse, who's been going to the city council meetings, who's been organizing and inviting people to come every Wednesday night to learn about what's going on. So I would really start there, and then collectively together, you all can learn, how to take action by following the lead of the person who's taking action. So I know that's not the most thorough answer about the language that we can use, but I would say really trying to identify those community leaders, luminaries, and organizations that have the solutions to the problems that we're facing, but really need resources and amplification and support.
I think that's a great answer. It's a great place to learn. It's a great place to get connected. I'm taking notes here. First, we have the books that we should read, and then actually someone saw the movie as well. It says not a question, but an affirmation to the point that Leah's making about the movie Sinners and the wisdom of Indigenous people. So thank you for that. And we would really welcome that list because I think we do need to educate ourselves differently and really use different language. We're very, I think, astute in talking about public health or policing. I think the message that I'm getting from you is the fact that we have to add this to our arsenal as well. We should always bring up this issue of environmental justice, health, and the thing that's coming to me again is because it will become a public health issue if we don't. They're not decoupled. And I really appreciate that. But I want to go back to a couple of things and some more practical ways that whether I'm a doctor or in finance, other than connecting with this group, how do we bring in the language of environmental justice into our organizations? Earlier, I mentioned that it's true. Liberty Mutual gave us a grant to really think about our organization's impact on the environment. And I know, and we took it one step further. We want to, really thank them for not even just nudging us, but saying, hey, here's a little bit of money. Think about this, which actually led us to you. And we thought, well, why aren't we talking about this more or amplifying this issue more broadly? Who's out there? But I think there are other ways that tech, healthcare, finance, really thinking through not just the civic action of what I should do outside of my work life, but how do we bring this into corporations? What should we be thinking about as corporations think through becoming part of this movement?
So I was very lucky. Right after I graduated, I was working at Patagonia headquarters in Ventura, the little puffer jackets with the Patagonia. They're one of the most sustainable companies in the world. They're B Corp certified, they manufacture sustainably, and in addition to that, they give away 1% or more to the planet specifically. So I think initiatives like that, 1% for the planet, getting certified as a B Corporation, which is an organization that, cares a lot about protecting people and planet and, corporate and social responsibility. But I think the number one thing that a company can do is really giving some of their money away, which I know isn't always possible. But the commitments like 1% for the planet, it's great. You can give away money to environmental organizations that are in the 1% for the planet, system. And honestly, that's the best thing a corporation can do, especially right now, because so many organizations are struggling with budgets, getting grants that are cut. I have so many friends in the environmental justice space, and their organizations are no longer receiving funding. So I think the best way corporations can show up is by acting as, you know, financial partners to reinvest in communities and then amplifying them. Like, I'm so grateful to be here today talking to everybody, and I think, bringing in speakers, bringing in consultants, even if it's, not an environmental justice specific project, bringing in somebody who might have an environmental justice leaning. Or I worked at Apple for about 8 months, specifically looking at how Apple could give money to smaller organizations. There are a lot of tech companies like Apple that make really large donations to a Sierra Club, a Greenpeace, etc., like we talked about, which is amazing, but really helping them to understand, okay, giving away $100 million to Greenpeace is amazing. But even giving away $100,000 grants to, 20 organizations or however many would be even more impactful and help a lot of on the ground grassroots organizations, scale their work. And the return is actually much higher at the community level if you do that. Because if an organization, for example, is fighting for getting clean water in a neighborhood, or they need to build, garden plots or something on rooftops in New York, they could do that with $50,000. So that goes a much, much longer way. So that's, why I really try to encourage companies to participate in some sort of, the spreading of wealth or wealth redistribution.
And I appreciate that you said we can have other people speak. I learned so much even just preparing for this conversation. I talked to Dr. Sims of Earth Justice, and and his thoughts on how many of the things that you mentioned. How can we really think local or get really super local about our funding, our work, and outcomes, and really think through not just the fuzzy, isn't this good work, but really think through what could be some local outcomes. We sit here in Boston for now, and one comment that came in that we need communities along the Neponset River that's here in Boston to be informed and engaged in hopefully an ongoing 10-year cleanup. Given the administrative changes and shifts in Washington, D.C., they're looking for partners to assist in potential reuse enhancements and documentation. That to me goes along with your comment, supporting local. And we really would appreciate that list to send out to people, because I think people see the large organizations, Sierra, Earth Justice, and the others that you mentioned. We have these little organizations here that are not seeing anything, or may even worse, crumble during this time. So we would really appreciate that list. Another question that came in: how to balance benefits with related environmental justice and pollution issues in marginalized communities. A community has two diesel trains running through it. This is a benefit, and it provides increased access to transit, but it results in more pollution. This goes back to your point about power plant. But as we think of whether it's more and more electricity being used, an electric car, you know, we are trying to increase transit. We hear a lot about, I'm going to throw in everything, right? We hear a lot about how we should really think through using resources differently, but how do we use resources smart? And what is there a framework that we should consider that maybe you have that we could share with people? Because I think the power plant illustration that you offered was really, really good. And we're thinking we're doing something good, but possibly not. Are there frameworks out there?
I would say, to start where you started, there's nuance to everything. And honestly, once you get down the rabbit hole, like everything that you do will have some sort of environmental cost.
Like AI.
Exactly. There's
And you
been
don't even think about it in that way.
great. I mean, I honestly use it on occasion, ChatGPT. Like there's helpful, uses of it. So every advancement in technology is going to have some sort of environmental cost. However, we just can't ignore that cost. So for example, if there's a train, or I forget what the reference was, that's a huge benefit to the community, and is like a necessary resource that's needed for the community, that might, I don't know. I don't want to argue. I mean, it could be a good thing for that specific community and for the time being, and then maybe they can work on in the future, making it run on, sustainable energy. But if it's helping get people to and from work, and, I love public transportation over people using cars, and I would say that's probably a net positive. Again, it can be really difficult, even if you talk about, lithium batteries or getting electric cars. Well, that lithium is being mined from indigenous communities in Argentina, and sometimes is making their water not so great or causing environmental justice issues abroad. So it's looking at, okay, when we are proposing solutions, just trying to be as comprehensive as possible, which doesn't always happen. Like, what are the positives? What are the pros and cons? If there are cons, how can we figure something out? So for example, in Argentina, in the lithium triangle, where we get lithium to power our batteries, how can we make sure indigenous communities are making money? If we are in, and making sure their water quality is okay. If we're back in the United States and they're proposing, maybe they want a solar farm or a wind farm, etc. How can we make sure that people who are local to that area are being employed? If we're moving away from coal and we want to have, green energy plants or different things like that, how can we make sure it's not just the rich who are getting richer? And again, like I said, people who are local can be employed, learn new skills, actually, participate in this green energy transition that we're hoping for. So yeah, there's just so much nuance in every environmental question. And I think for anyone who's new to environmentalism, to kind of take a sigh and know that that's okay. There's not going to be one solution. There's going to be multiple solutions that are a part of that solution, and just finding the one that works for you. And there's going to be people who, disagree. I have people that disagree with the way that I envision the future to look like, and that's, totally okay. But I feel like I didn't completely answer your question.
We did, and more. And I
Okay.
like this takeaway, do what you can because others are doing things as well. And I love that. Take a deep breath. No, it's okay. That's right. And do what you can. So do what you can. I have a question. So what's giving you hope now? What fills you with joy? Share some of that joy with us.
Joy do I have? Honestly, I feel very privileged to live in close proximity to so many like mountains, or just being able to go for a walk or a hike or connect with nature. I think the Black community gives me a lot of joy and a lot of hope. I think we're a really funny community as well, and we find like humor in the things that are happening. So I feel very grateful to be a part of that, even just getting on, Threads, which is basically, the former was Twitter, just seeing the commentary and the humor to the things that are happening and just allowing myself to participate, supporting Black media and art. So seeing, Sinners, it was also really cool to see like almost like a fantasy genre, and just seeing how creative Black folks are and like supporting. I feel like that's what gives me joy. Like I might see that movie a couple times. Like I enjoyed it. It wasn't like my favorite movie in the world, but I'm gonna see it a bunch. So I feel like taking part and the joyful things that are happening in the Black community, like the dialogue that's happening about that movie, or, if an album comes out, or analyzing the Super Bowl performance, or these things that just feel so Black, like that's what gives me joy, because I think that we're going to be all right, because we always are all right. And I feel like our humor is just so funny. And yeah, that's how we're gonna get through it. Like we're gonna be okay. We're always okay. I don't know how, but we're gonna be fine. And that's what gives me hope.
We're going to be okay because you're here. This has been an amazing hour. Thank you so much, Leah. You have taught us so much. I'm really looking forward to all these pearls and gems you've dropped here, and the list you're going to give us. But most of all, I don't know what I expected tonight, and what you brought was just joy, and just this spirit of while we may be in this space that things are changing and shifting, we all have the power to do something for Mother Earth that will make this place better. I really like your idea, like for children to give them more hope and hopefully and be okay with getting in the dirt. I love the thought of, getting local with this and really understanding the environmental justice movement that's local and participating. I think we all need to follow you. I think we all need to dial into you and get some Leah joy every day. But thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, great, informative, impactful conversation. And I think I just can't say enough about our sponsors, particularly Liberty Mutual, that pushed us to find you through our grant. And you have just shared so much with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. And we want to thank you, our audience. Thank you so much for joining us for this hour. Again, there's so much happening around us, but what we want to celebrate are our assets. And as you can see, Leah, as I stated earlier, is not only a bright, shining asset in our community, but also for all communities. We want to give thanks to, we're going to read off our sponsors, whether it's the Astra Foundation, Barr Foundation, Terry and Bradley Bloom Family Fund, the Endowment for Health, Fidelity Charitable Catalyst Fund, Eastern Bank, Patriots Foundation, Greater Cincinnati Foundation, TJX Foundation, and most of all to Liberty Mutual and W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Thank you for your support and your belief in our work. And we thank each and every one of you for joining us. We hope that you will take this conversation with you, not just to your community, but also live it through your philanthropy as well. Thank you and a good night.